I think we show up here with a mission. We have tasks, we have lessons, we have things that we have to do while we're here. And for some of us, that's a very short time. And for some, it's a very long time. And some people will have 30 years experience. And some people will have 1 year experience 30 times. Two different approaches. Endlessly keep repeating the same thing over again, and others are growing. It's not the same for anybody. I just talked to somebody just the other day who's got 29 years working at a plant in Indiana. His real love is he has an apple orchard. He has 290 trees. He knew so much about apples and about all the different kinds of apples and all the controversy about pesticides and why they have to be used and which ones are safe and which ones aren't and how much water that you have to give them and why you just let nature do it in a certain way and where you plant them and when you harvest them. And he had this whole thing he had discovered about how to keep apples for 6 months by putting them in your refrigerator and keeping them cool, but you've got to keep moisture in there. He said the moisture goes out, and he was so excited about his apples. And yet he spends 99% of his life doing something that he doesn't like doing. I said, your bliss is your apples, isn't it? And your apple orchard. Oh, he said, I love it when I'm out there with that. I just feel like I'm with God at that time. I said, is there any way to make this so you don't have to do this other stuff? So that you don't have to spend your life in this sort of inauthentic way where you're always thinking about how much you dislike what you're doing? Well, I've never thought about really making a living at it and all that. I said, somebody's got to buy apples, and there's applesauce that's got to be made, and there's apple pies that have got to be made, and it's like if you get your bliss, if you know what it is, then it's just a matter of taking some of the risks that go with it. And why not? Why restrict yourself in any way? What I was suggesting to him was like, give yourself a chance at that. There's two things that I think about what you're doing. You've got to love what you do, and you got to do what you love. Everybody can do this. And I don't really think it matters too much what you're doing. But if you don't like it, you have options. The first option that you have is that you can leave it and take the risk that goes with following your bliss. And I know what your question is already. How do I know what my bliss is? Well, I'll come to that. So what you do know is what it isn't. We always know what it isn't. For sure. That's no problem. But you can leave what you're doing. That's number one. Or you can change around your thoughts about what it is that you're doing. You have that option. You can decide that if you just are not willing to take the risk, or you have to stay with this or whatever, that I can change my thoughts toward it. And I can make it as creative and do all kinds of things with it and say, all right, I'm only going to do this for 6 hours or 8 hours in a day, and then I'm going to get right out into my apple orchards. And this is sort of what this fellow was doing, was learning how to go into this assembly line job that he had and do it and not have such a negative, terrible attitude about it and have fun with it and make it blissful. So you can change. There's risks involved with all of that for some people. I think that the risks are much less than most of us realize. They're not really risks at all after a while. They're just like adventures and their excitement. And the people who really love you and support you in your life will support you trying new things. But how do you find your bliss then? To come back to that question. The answer to that is you don't. You have to let your bliss find you. And your bliss can't find you. It sounds strange, but your bliss cannot find you. It's like your purpose. It cannot find you as long as you're filled up or clogged up with something else. Here's a wonderful story. There was an expert on Buddhism and Far Eastern religions, and he was a professor at a university. He had written 4 or 5 books on the subject, and he was really considered a true expert. But he had always wanted to meet a particular Zen saint who lived in India, up near Nepal. And so he traveled there with all of his books. He wanted to meet this particular Zen saint, a guru. He had made an appointment, and he introduced himself, and the man had just like a loincloth on, and he was very simple, very peaceful, very old, so you get the picture. And the expert began talking to him about all the things that he knew about Zen and Buddhism and so on. And the master stopped him and said, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And he said, "Yes, that would be very nice." He took a teacup and he put it in a saucer, and the man continued to talk about all of the things that he knew about. And the master picked up the tea and he began to pour it into the cup. And the man continued talking, and then the cup was full, and the master continued to pour. And the tea poured out of the cup and onto the saucer, and as the man talked, he still kept pouring. And the tea was now going onto the floor and onto the man's pants and finally he stopped him and he said, "Excuse me, but the cup is full. You're pouring, and it's full." And the master stopped him and said, "You are like the cup." He said, "You are so full of everything that you know that you don't have room to let anything else new in." And so many of us are just like that teacup. We're so full of all of the stuff that we have learned that there's no more room to let anything else in. It's just all pouring out and just going past us and all outside of us. Now, if you can see that metaphor in yourself, you can begin to see that in the eyes of the beginner, there are millions of options. In the eyes of the expert, there are only one or two. So the suggestion to finding your bliss is to always be a beginner on the path. Never become an expert. If you're going to go out and learn tennis and you've never played it before, and someone hands you a racket and they say, "Now, try a drop shot this way," you are open. You are willing. "I'll do that. Now hit a forehand this way. Now, well, try it this way if you move over here. And now try." The beginner has 1,000 options available to them and will try everything. But if you talk to an expert about how to hit a backhand, they only know one way. Now, that's true not just in tennis. That's true in your business. That's true in your relationships. That's true in everything in your life. Stay a beginner along the path. You can get clogged up, so clogged up with what you know and with the negativity that goes with that and all the rejection, all the judgment that goes with that, because you have to reject all kinds of other points of view in order to make sure that yours is the only one that ever gets heard or ever gets used, that you don't have any room inside of you for something new and something exciting and something different and expanding yourself and so on. So be wary of experts, especially if you're one yourself. Be wary of yourself becoming one, because then you limit yourself. And by limiting yourself, your bliss, your purpose, which is there, can't find you. It's like an artery that's clogged up with cholesterol. Nothing can flow through it because it's too clogged. You've got to unclog yourself. And the way you unclog yourself is by opening yourself up and advancing confidently and doing things that make sense to you, that make you feel good, that are of service to others, that are useful to other people, whatever it is that you're doing.
Move from thinking in a rigid way to thinking and being flexible, soft, and allowing. From rigidity to softness. What a wonderful transformation that is. I was standing looking with my son Sands, and we were on Maui, and we were looking at water as water was going against some rocks and some cliffs and so on. And in these pictures, in this moment, I said to my son, I said, which do you think is stronger? The water or the cliff? The water or the rocks? Which one do you think is more powerful and stronger? And he said, well, he said the rocks, obviously they're stronger and they're bigger and all. I said, water is very, very patient, isn't it? How much chance do those rocks have if they want to survive? I mean, what chance do they have? And Lao Tzu is speaking to us about understanding our nature by examining how nature works and then making it apply to our thoughts, so that a soft thought, a thought that isn't a rigid thought, a thought that doesn't say you have to be this way or you have to be that way, a thought that is not stiff, a thought that water, there are so many references to water and what we can learn from water. You're 75% water. The planet is 75% water. We are water. The rest of us is just muscled water. It's all water. And water is soft. Water can enter anywhere. You get into a conflict with somebody else, and you picture yourself as water. You can enter with water in any place that there's an opening. If you can visualize yourself as a being who moves into the space of water, if you can see yourself that way, you can just enter into those places in the people that you love, in your children, in your spouse, in anyone at all, and enter there softly. Here's verse 8. The supreme good is water, which nourishes all things without trying to. And verse 78, right smack out of the Tao. Nothing in the world is softer and weaker than water. But for attacking the hard, the unyielding, nothing can surpass it. There is nothing like it. Here it is. I asked when they designed this set, this beautiful set, and thank you, designers, for this. I asked if I could have water on the stage. They did it. They figured it out. There's a Now, I'm going to try to get some of this water, okay? So you get down here and you just, I'm going to just scoop this up. And okay, now tighter you hold it, the less chance you have of doing anything with it, isn't it? How can I experience water? The way to experience water is to just get soft, just get unbending. And there it is. That's what water is. The minute I grasp it, the minute I try, and Lao Tzu is saying the same thing is true in everything in your life. The more you grasp, the more you try to hold on to it, the more you try to be rigid with it, the less control you have of it. In front of my place on Maui, there is a beautiful set of 11 or 12 palm trees. And these are like 30, 40, 50 feet tall. They've been there for, I don't know how long, decades. And when the winds come and when the storms come, the storms will blow them over. There they are, watch. And they're just these amazing elastic things. I learned so much from these things. I go out there, when I wrote the essay in the book on the verse 73, I just went out there with the palm trees and I would just commune with these palm trees. And they go all the way up and then they come all the way back. That's a symbol for how we need to think in our own lives. In verse 73 it says, "It is heaven's way to conquer without striving. It does not ask, yet it is supplied with all that it needs. It does not hurry, yet it completes everything on time." One of my favorite lines from the Tao, one of my favorite beliefs from the Tao is this, that you're doing nothing. All of you, you're doing nothing. You're just being done. Just like you were the first 9 months of your life. You think you're out there and you're making this happen and you're making that happen and you've got all these rigid things and you have to apply your life this way. You're not doing anything. Any more than you were having your fingernails show up when they were supposed to. And look at you. Look at all of you. Look around. You know, it's like, you know, what held it in yesterday? You know, I don't know. I'm not doing anything. They fall out and they don't fall out no matter how hard I try to keep them in there. Finally, my kid said, "Give it up. Give it up." So I was over in England, and they told me that I couldn't take my shampoo bottles on the plane. And there's nothing you can do about it. I said, "Yes, there is. I'll just shave my head. I no longer need shampoo." Okay, so we want to move from stiffness to flexibility. To change from thinking big to thinking small. It's so much of the Tao has in it statements that seem so paradoxical and so confusing to us. More is less. Less is more. Think small and get great things done. Accomplish great things. Listen to verse 64 of the Tao Te Ching. "A tree that fills a man's embrace grows from a seedling. A tower 9 stories high starts with 1 brick." And here's the most famous line out of the Tao. "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with what?
The first step."
1 first step. Okay? So, today, I can stand up here on this stage in this beautiful sacred place, in this beautiful yin-yang symbol, on this incredibly beautiful set that feels so much like nature. And I can say to you that in a very short time, this year, I will have completed 20 years without taking a drink of alcohol. 20 years, okay? Thank you. Now that's big. And if I would have tried, if I'd have said to myself 20 years ago, "Wayne, you're going to quit drinking for the next 20 years, I would have gone immediately and had a drink. Because it's just too big. isn't it? It's just too big. You don't do big things. You do small things and thus accomplish great things. It's a very important distinction to make. Whatever it is that you would like to create or contribute or become in your life, take one step. How did I let drinking go for 20 years? And I don't even know about tomorrow. I never think about tomorrow and whether I'm going to have a drink. All I know for sure is that this won't be the day. I do it one day at a time. That's how you overcome anything called an addiction in your life. You take it, you reconnect yourself to the source from which you came, which is a source of what? Well-being, isn't it? And you get back and return, get on the return trip and say, I am connected to well-being. And I'll do this one day, 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second if I have to, at a time. And when you do it, I mean, it's behind in all of the programs for overcoming addictions, and all of the work of Bill W., all of the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, all of the work of any kind of addictions. It isn't just alcohol. It can be food. It can be addiction to your emails. It can be addiction to work. It can be addiction to so many things that so many people find that they can't get past. And to move themselves into a place where I think small. I ran 7 marathons in my running years. And about the 22nd or 23rd mile, you begin to ask yourself about your sanity. And what am I doing here? And my body is breaking down. But the way that you finish the marathon is not by saying, I'm going to run 26 miles. You don't do that, especially when you've still got 5 or 6 to go. You just say to yourself, can I put my foot in front of the next one? Can I take one step at a time? Can I do it one step at a time? And before you know it, you've accomplished great things. I watched my wife give birth to 4 children, right there in her, in the delivery room with her. And she does not, when you have a baby, it takes 9 months, doesn't it? You don't say to yourself, oh my God, I gotta have a baby, I gotta get pregnant, I gotta deliver it, I gotta go through labor, because that'll just drive you. And there are people who do that. And it's a torture for them. But I watched her do it one moment at a time in labor. Not what's going to happen an hour from now, what's going to happen this afternoon, am I going to have the... None of that. And she did it all naturally because it was all... And her mind was so strong as she was doing it that I couldn't even penetrate. I couldn't even communicate with her. She was so focused on just being here. She would say, these are not labor pains. These are just signals. Just signal. And I can take this signal. I can do this for 1 minute. I can do this. And every great athlete, I don't care who they are, they will always say, I can't think out there in big ways. I can only think small. Thinking small is what gets great things done. Verse 63. Achieve greatness in little things. Take on difficulties while they are still easy. Do great things while they are still small. The sage, one of my daughter's names, the sage, does not attempt anything very big and thus achieves greatness. Greatness comes from being in the moment, here, present, in the now. The sage confronts difficulties but never experiences them. This is the idea of thinking small.
There's another collection of writings of Lao Tzu, and it's called the Hua Hu Cheng, which means it's the unknown teachings of Lao Tzu. And this is one of the things that he says in verse 59 and 60. He says, if you wish to become a divine, immortal angel, then restore the angelic qualities of your being through virtue and service. This is the only way to gain the attention of the immortals who teach the methods of energy enhancement and integration that are necessary to reach the divine realm. The divine realm is the realm of meaning. When you are totally on purpose in your life and you're getting the guidance of the divine realm. These angelic teachers cannot be sought out, Lao Tzu says. You can't find them. You can't ask for them.
It is they who will seek out the student. When you succeed in connecting your energy with the divine realm, that is, live at a God consciousness way as God lives, through high awareness and the practice of undiscriminating virtue, the transmission of the ultimate subtle truths will follow. And then he says in verse 60, the mystical techniques for achieving immortality are revealed only to those who have dissolved all ties to the gross worldly realm of duality, conflict, and dogma. As long as your shallow worldly ambitions exist, the door will not open. As long as your shallow worldly ambitions exist, the door will not open. So then I go back to the story that I'm telling you about Assisi and this magical miracle thing that I thought happened to me because I'm just a chosen one. You know, I'm the chosen guy with the big ego, you know, and like, of course St. Francis is going to pick me. Who else would he pick? All right? And so on. And I really thought that for the last 5 minutes, just not like I thought, you know, I'm deserving of something special, but I just associated, using the intellect, I just associated all of the things that I was doing with, of course, this is a natural unfolding, and I'm obviously above all of these other people who don't, you know, so all of that was going on in my head, all right? And then it hit me when I read this, and when I wrote Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, that the way that you make the transition to open the door to the divine realm, which is the realm of purpose, it's the realm of meaning, it's the realm of living your dharma, fulfilling your destiny. What you signed up for is by living the undiscriminating virtue that he's talking about. So what are the virtues? And what was I doing in that moment? Now, in the moment that John said, what are we going to do? I didn't think of myself at all. It never occurred to me, nothing else occurred to me other than, whatever it is that's going on in you, forget it, just help this guy out. You know, you've got to help him out, and you're right next to him. You're the only one that can. And I forgot totally about myself. I let go of all of what might be involved with me, that I might hurt my leg, that you know, that's a long way to carry somebody who weighs more than I do, that it's, you know, I didn't do any of that. I just immersed myself in total service to this person, which is what God realization is all about. I mean, the poet Hafiz has this wonderful line. He said, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. He said, just think what a love like that can do. It lights up the whole world. So it's like, it's not so I was, in the moment that I lived the virtues, was really 100% living the virtue, I understood what is meant when, this idea that the laws of the material world do not apply in the presence of the God realized. The laws of the material world don't apply in the presence of God, in the presence of God realization.
So we have this myth that we live under that says we come into this world. And we really sort of think of ourselves as like a construction project. You know, like there's the spirit world, and we divide it up into befores and afters. So I'm here, but before I was here, I was nowhere. And then I went from nowhere, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, to now here, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, just a little different spacing. And now I'm in now here, and I look around, and after a while I have this thundering realization that I'm going back to nowhere, and then it's all the same. But somehow our intellect, our left brain, tells us we come from a spirit world, and then we come into this physical world, and then when we leave it and we die, we go back to a spirit world. Isn't that what we think? It's not like that at all. We have to shatter that myth. Here's the way to think of it. It's like, think of a plum tree. Plum tree has very interesting characteristics of it. Again, you go back to the seed, you know the seed inside of a plum. Is there plum essence in a Plum seed? Is the essence of plumness in a plum seed? Has to be, doesn't it? So you put the seed into the ground, and you plant it, and all of a sudden it starts breaking open and roots develop, and they go under the ground. Is there plum essence in the roots? Isn't there? There has to be, doesn't there? Something in there is going to create plums. And then those roots grow and spread, and all of a sudden it's free, starts sprouting up above the surface. And there's a trunk. Is there plum essence in the trunk? Yeah. And then the trunk gets higher, and there are branches. And then the branches develop leaves. And then the leaves develop blossoms. And then the blossoms develop little buds. And then the little buds turn into little tiny plums. And then you let them stay on there for a while, and then they turn into purple plums or green plums or whatever their essence is. Now, we don't say, when we observe this phenomenon, that these plums showed up from the spirit essence world of plumness. Do we? We don't do that. We just look at the tree and we observe it and we watch the whole thing and we realize that plum essence is in all of the thing, and we stand back and we watch it and we say, you know, the damn thing just plums. It just plums like an apple tree. It just apples. So too are we like this. We are not separate from that spirit world. That separation is the thing we gotta get out of us. It's like someone could come back and look at the whole planet and say there's vegetation, there's rocks, there's minerals, there's rain, there's sunshine. Look at this thing from a distance. Look at it. Just watch it. And what happens? You watch it and you watch it and you watch it, and the damn thing just peoples. It just peoples. That's the way Alan Watts put it. It just simply peoples. We don't come into this world. We grow out of this world. We are a part of all of it, and we can never escape it. And once you know this, once you get this, that you weren't placed in here from this spirit world, any more than plums were, or apples, or cockroaches, or anything. We are all in this thing called the environment together. And this divineness, this spirituality, this higher consciousness is a part of all of it. And we have to know that, rather than separating it out. This world, that world, this world. Because our senses tell us that before you're here, you're nowhere. And after you leave here, you're gone. But our senses are not reliable at all. They misguide us all the time. They tell us that we're sitting here right now. And they say, you're sitting there still. You're not moving. That's what our senses tell us, don't we? We don't think we're moving. You think you're spinning right now? But yet you are, aren't you? Aren't we turning and spinning and hurling through space and all of that? Our senses tell us all of this stuff. It's not true. So we don't want to rely upon our senses. That's the intellect. We want to rely upon our heart and have this knowing that my essence is in every single aspect of myself. And that in order to transcend the prison of the duality of the physical plane, I go to my source. And when I go to my source, I get quiet. The place where I cannot further be divided. You see, our egos divide us up. We divide ourselves up by our races, by our sexes, by our age, by our appearances, by our economic class, by our languages. And then we divide ourselves up further within the country by our communities, by our cities, by our states. And we divide ourselves further by our schools and our religious orientations and our food preferences and the shape of our eyes. What we want to do is come up with a new symbol. Get rid of the bulldozer and come up with a new symbol. It's called a hologram. Think of humanity as like a 6 billion piece hologram. And we take one piece out and we put a laser beam through it and we see all of humanity. That's what manifesting is like. You have to be able to see yourself as an individualized expression of the whole of it all, and not see yourself as separate from anything in this environment.
And I wrote these words out in the shift. Believing that you're separate from God. The collective consciousness of humanity painfully and unnecessarily influences us by believing in and behaving like an ego-designed God. Those are my words. An ego-designed God. We've created a God out of our egos that matches our false selves. A few of the attributes of this ego-designed God are that it plays favorites, that it craves opulence, that it promotes killing and warfare in the name of God, that it accepts indulgences for special favors, that it punishes bad behavior, that it needs to be avenged. These and many other attitudes illustrated a God created by the illusions of the collective ego. Throughout history, this ego-designed or man-made God is characterized as separate from us. Who among us hasn't heard of God portrayed as a white, dead male with a long, flowing beard who floats around the heavens with supernatural powers, watching over us like a cosmic bellboy who will answer our prayers sometimes, depending upon his whims and whether we've obeyed his rules? This God is viewed not as an all-giving divine source, but rather as a temperamental superpower who withholds his ability to solve our problems or heals our diseases, depending upon whether he's in the mood to grant us special dispensation. This is a God of the ego, created by ego and dedicated to serving ego's demands. This is a God that must, by virtue of its own ego, be separate from the subjects that it must watch over, control, and punish when necessary. And that's what it looks like. This idea that we are separate from God, it's not blasphemy to say that I am God, which doesn't make me better than anyone else, because that's not the God from which we originated. The God from which we originated, the source of all things, is benevolent, is loving. It doesn't know how to make distinctions. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. For a mind at war with itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is a part of you. For you must be as God created you, as your source created you. Remember, you didn't come from your parents. You came from the void. Let all this madness be undone for you, and return in peace to the remembrance of God still shining in your quiet mind. In Australia, not too long ago, I was on the Tonight Show there, and the woman asked me the question, what is your mission? And I just blurted out, to live a God-realized life. She said, what does that mean? And I just thought, just thinking like whatever the source of all things thinks like, to be in alignment with that. Just to think that way. That's all. Just to think that way and act that way. That's what I'd like to do. That's how I'd like to live my life, whatever days I have. And as we now start to make the U-turn, we're going to come back and we start heading in a different direction. We start coming back to what T.S. Eliot said. We shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time. One of my favorite quotes is from Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick. And when I read it in college, I thought I was reading a book about a man chasing a whale. And now I realize, having read it again, that it's about a man trying to find himself and his passion, and to live his passion. And Melville would go out onto he lived in western Massachusetts back in the 19th century. And he would lie down on the cornfields in western Massachusetts with his head up so that he could get a vision of what it must have been like to be out there on that ocean all by himself. And all he could see was corn silk. I read this in a biography of Melville.
And he would just stare at this, the immensity of this. And that's just what he would imagine. And then he wrote these words. He said, "For as this appalling ocean surrounds the verdant land, so in the soul of man lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all of the horrors of the half-lived life." I just don't think writing gets much better than that. Go to Tahiti. Find that place within. Go within and let the ego be scorched, as Ramana Maharshi put it. The student should constantly remind yourself, if it doesn't feel natural, it isn't going to work. Okay? Now, I was being interviewed on a national television show by a guy who was about 5'7" and weighed maybe 140 pounds. And he did this long, intensive interview with me. And he said, "You mean to tell me that if I do everything that you say, that I can become a linebacker for the New York Giants professional football team?" Because he lived in New York. And I said, "Does it feel natural for you to be a linebacker for the New York Giants? Does that feel natural to you?" And he said, "No, it doesn't." And if it just doesn't feel natural to you, then all of the rest of this is just a waste of your energy. Now, the question isn't whether you're going to become a linebacker on a professional football team, but does it feel natural for you to say, "I deserve prosperity"? Does it feel natural for you to say, "I deserve to be in a state of well-being"? I deserve for my body to weigh exactly what I want it to weigh, what it is supposed to weigh? Does it feel natural for you to say, "I am beautiful, I am strong, I am capable, I am loved"? If it doesn't feel natural, you've got a real problem going with your subconscious mind. You have to start reprogramming your subconscious mind to say, "I came from a place of well-being. I came from a place of perfect health. I came from a place of love. And I am well-being. I am wealth." Now, on the other hand, there are some people, like there's a basketball player out there in the NBA. His name is Muggsy Bogues. Muggsy Bogues is about 2'3". Now, he's about 5'7" or 5'8". And he can dunk a basketball. He's 5'7", and he can dunk a basketball. I'm 6'2". I can hardly see the rim. But somehow, for this man who was 5'7", it felt natural for him to be able to elevate his body and grab onto a rim that's 10 feet off of the ground. And it feels natural for him, and he's able to do it. And there are so many examples of people who have accomplished things that they have never had a belief system that it was impossible for them. So for every single one of us, the intention needs to be, it feels natural to me. Even if I don't know how to do it, even if I have no experience with it, even if it's something that everybody else has told me I can't do,